It's here! Alright, now this is a package that I've been waiting for a while now. I'm pretty excited about it. You might have heard me talking about this in the last video. This is the Removu K1. Okay, so it was brought to my attention that the last unboxing that I did wasn't exactly the most informative, so I'm trying to take this one a little more seriously. This is also a whole lot more interesting than opening an ND filter. So let's just get started. Now I ordered this from B&H because, believe it or not, it doesn't seem to be available anywhere in Australia as yet. I couldn't find any Australian stores that had it in stock, or even on pre-order for that matter. And this is the version not only with the Removu itself, but also with all the additional accessories. So we've got the smart battery. This is just a spare battery. And we've got the full accessory kit, which includes a microphone and a lens protector, wrist strap, and a few other little bits and pieces. Like there's a charging station, I think, a docking station. I don't think I've ever been self-conscious about how I open a box before now. Alright, so what we got here, we have the cover that goes on the Removu itself to protect the lens, which to me is something that really does belong on the lens in the first place. It's not something that should be an additional accessory. But anyway, and we have the charging station, which has a USB charger to it, so I don't actually need any additional power plugs or anything like that, which is pretty good because coming from the US I might have run into a little trouble there. That's just a lens cloth, and here we have a wrist strap. So those are all the additional accessories. Very cool little microphone, and it even includes a dead cat for preventing some of the wind noise. Alright, and now on to the actual Removu itself. Getting some of this stuff out of the way. Instructions pack, and the Removu itself, which is currently in a locked position. I think it can lock more than this though. Yeah, that's a proper locked position. These little plastic protectors. And you see what I mean? The lens itself is actually exposed, so I don't really see why they wouldn't have included that in the first place. Because if you're going to stow this in a bag or something, you really want something to protect that lens. Alright, so anyway, and unlocking it, there we go. We have it completely unlocked. Let me see if it has any power on it. You see if I can figure out where the on button is. Ooh, got some other nice plastic protection bits. There we go. Okay. It doesn't come charged up, which I suppose probably makes sense given that it's traveling through the mail. Oh no, here we go. Woo! We have ourselves a Removu. Of course, it doesn't have a card. So you can use, there's a little joystick here on the back that you can use to move the camera around, to pan left and right and up and down. And a micro SD port, of course, so that you can put a card in it. All in all, it's, I mean, it's made of plastic, but it feels pretty good. It feels pretty, feels pretty sturdy. Alright, so obviously the screen itself is very small, but the fact that you can flip it into selfie mode and still be able to see yourself in that screen means that the positioning is pretty excellent, and you really don't need to have a lot of detail on the LCD itself, because in reality all you're trying to do is to make sure that you're properly in the shot and get a very vague idea of how the shot is composed. Alright, so now that that's all done, I think I'm going to quickly charge this thing up and we'll get heading off. Try it out. Okay, so before we head off and put this to the test, I just wanted to mention a couple of little observations that I've made. First of all, you might have noticed that I've got this in a little pencil case thing. It turns out that this was hidden away in the box and I only noticed it after I'd finished recording the video. So yeah, something to put it in. Nothing too special there. I also wanted to mention that the firmware that this came with was very old. There's been several firmware updates since the version that this shipped with. And I did take a little video outside just before updating the firmware because I wanted to see what sort of a difference it makes. Looking at this video now, you'll notice that there is some significant distortion in the image, particularly notable around the face, which is looking quite elongated, very unnatural looking. But in this shot, which is after the firmware was updated, it's looking a whole lot better. Something else that I was surprised to find with this is there's an option to film in both NTSC and PAL. I've heard that question asked a few times, but I was under the impression that there wasn't any other option other than 30 frames per second for 4K. But it turns out, nope, you can switch to PAL and you've got an option to film in 25 frames per second. Yay! There will be those, of course, who are wanting to film in 24 frames per second. As far as I can tell, that doesn't seem to be an option here, but you never know, in another upcoming firmware update, maybe they'll correct that. Fingers crossed. Okay, so just one last thing that I wanted to mention before we head off just now. I was aware when I bought this that there wasn't an option for mounting an ND filter on it at the moment. But I was extremely surprised when I realized that you could actually unscrew the front lens element. So it's not exactly a standard ND mount, but I can't see why a company couldn't very easily produce ND filters for this. So, Removu, can we have an ND filter, please? Alright, well, we're on our way into Fremantle at the moment. We're going to check out the Fremantle Prison. I'm still trying to figure my way out around how far I need to actually hold the camera out here, because if you're a little too close, you're out of focus. According to all the documentation, it's supposed to be 50 centimeters, but I kind of feel like it's a little bit longer than that. One of the other things that I found kind of tricky with this camera is the fact that there's no proper control on the volume. You've got a choice of basically minus 12 decibels, minus 6, 0, plus 6 and plus 12, and you don't have a headphone jack, so you can't actually monitor it to check whether or not it's the right volume. So what I actually had to do was test out with different microphones to see what does work and what doesn't, and it turns out if I'm using this Rode SmartLav, I need to have it turned all the way down to minus 12, otherwise it just totally distorts and it's unusable. Alright, so here we are in Fremantle Prison. Now, given of course that the Removu K1 doesn't really have any kind of close focus, 50 centimeters or further in order to have everything in focus, I brought along this as just a bit of an extra kind of a low light and close-up camera. I think together these two might just make the perfect vlogging kit.
First volunteer, come on down. Lucky day. Toes on the line, 1 foot either side of the H. So spread your feet apart. That's it. Alright, now I just need to check that you're not trying to smuggle in any drugs or weapons. Are you smuggling in any drugs or weapons? Yes. Alright. Alright, so hands out, fingers spread, palms up, arms up, open your mouth, open your nose, wider. Open your ears. Not even trying. Alright, lift your feet up for me. Both at the same time. Hold them up really high. Alright, now squat down and cough twice. Very good. Did you guys see anything fall out the back then when you did that? Don't think anything did it. It must still be up there. I'm going to have to get you to turn around and bend over. I'm going to get this rubber glove out. Okay. There you go, mate. Prisoners on remand, they're coming in here like straight after getting charged, like straight off the streets. It's the most volatile time for a prisoner. You can't afford to stop watching your back. Filled with anxiety, paranoia, that constant threat of violence and abuse, and people just trying to, take advantage of you in one way or another. Cuts the rope to be the right length, so the drop is just right. And then, once he's cut it, he boils it, attaches a sandbag, drops it, all to remove the elasticity. On the morning of the hanging, they collect the condemned prisoner from his death row cell way over in New Division. He's given a new uniform with laces down the front, and he's escorted through the prison into the holding cell just behind him. Trusted prisoners who were buying extra food from the canteen at the end could no longer feed them chocolate bars through the window. So that was the end of that lunch.
Well, there we have it, my first video filmed with the Removu K1 with a few shots using the Panasonic GX85 just for that little bit of shallow depth of field and for low light as well. I must say though that the K1 managed pretty well in low light. Not that it was all that dark indoors in the prison anyway. So here are my first impressions of using the Removu K1. It's very decent, the gimbal works well, you've got plenty of options for producing interesting videos, 4K at 25 or 30, moderate slow motion with WQHD at 50, and you've even got 1080p at 120 frames per second. You might have also noticed some time lapse there. The image quality is fairly decent, especially given the small sensor size. As I almost always do, I set the sharpening to its lowest setting, expecting that the camera would produce an over-sharpened image, as is usually the case with consumer cameras and mobile phones, but it turns out that I needn't have worried. I ended up having to sharpen the image in post because it was too soft. The preamps on this camera are definitely not the best. It took a little work in post to get the audio sounding okay, but it is possible. I especially liked the audio that came from the little Removu mic itself. It seems like the safest option is to keep your audio to minus 12 decibels. It seems any higher than that, you run the risk of the audio peaking and getting some distortion. I did come across one odd little glitch as the battery was starting to run flat. I started getting these weird little audio glitches that were loud enough and annoying enough that they ruined a couple of my shots. Right, so we're heading on our way back home now. That was a pretty interesting tour, and $22 per person for an hour and 15 minutes. I really don't think it was too bad value. Once I replaced the battery though, the glitches vanished, so hey, go figure. Anyway, I hope all of this has been useful for those who are considering buying the Removu K1. It's not a perfect camera, but it's one of only a few camera gimbal combos on the market, and in my opinion, it's probably the first one that really meets the needs of your average vlogger. I'm sure that there will be those who disagree, and I'm keen to hear from you. By all means, have a comment and let me know. At 17mm equivalent focal length, this is a very wide angle lens, and as a result there is quite a lot of distortion. If you're vlogging and you don't want to end up with a weird shaped head, you'll want to place yourself directly in the middle of the composition. Something that I'll have to keep in mind for future videos. Anyway, that's about all there is for this video. Let me know in the comments below whether this camera would suit your needs. What would your ideal vlogging setup be? Have you come across a better setup? And what do you use to vlog with right now? I'd love to hear from you. I'll be putting out another video in a week or two, so until then, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you again soon.